Hello, and welcome to another exciting session of Ask a BA. In this session, we'll be looking at business analyst interview questions and answers using the STAR method. Now, in this session, on each preceding page, you will see a question around an area in business analysis. And then you will see a summary of the answer using the STAR method. And on the next page, you will see a detailed breakdown of how you could answer this question in an interview. There will be 12 example questions in this session. If you're ready, let us begin. Tell me about a time when you had to gather requirements from stakeholders with conflicting priorities. How did you handle it? A summary of this answer using the STAR method. Remember, the STAR method stands for situation, task, action, and result. The situation is multiple stakeholders with different priorities. Your task is aligning requirements. Your action is facilitated a meeting to understand priorities, created a phased approach. And the result? Stakeholders were satisfied and the project was delivered successfully. Now, let's see an example of how you would actually answer this question during an interview. In my previous role, I was working on a project where we had multiple stakeholders with different priorities. The marketing team wanted to launch a new feature quickly, while the development team was focused on ensuring system stability before introducing any new changes. The task I had to do was to align both teams and ensure that we gathered all necessary requirements while addressing each team's concerns. I facilitated a meeting where both teams could express their priorities and concerns. I used this opportunity to align both parties by explaining the dependencies between system stability and the new feature. I worked with them to create a phased approach, first stabilizing the system and then gradually rolling out the new feature. And the result was that the stakeholders were satisfied because we had managed to address their concerns and create a roadmap. The project was delivered successfully, meeting the marketing team's launch deadline, while also maintaining the development team's need for system stability. Describe a situation where you had to analyze a complex set of data. How did you approach it? Again, the summary of this question, the answer is analyzing large customer feedback datasets, identifying key patterns and insights, cleaned data, categorized teams using SQL and Tableau, and the result was identified usability issues, product update, increased satisfaction by 15%. Now let's see how you'd actually answer this question in an interview. Going on from here, I will not go through the summary questions. I will just read out the question and then we'll go straight into how you would answer it in an interview. Now for this question, let's see how you could answer this in an interview. Thank you for that question. In a previous project, I was asked to analyze customer feedback data to help identify patterns in product usage. The data was vast, coming from various sources like surveys, customer service calls, and online reviews. My task was to shift through the data, identify key patterns, and provide actionable insights to improve the product. One of the first things I did was to clean the data by eliminating duplicates and addressing missing values. Then I categorized the feedback into different themes. For example, I considered usability issues, feature requests. Then I used Excel and SQL to run queries and segment the data based on product features, customer demographics, and sentiment. Finally, I used visualization tools like Tableau to create clear reports that showed the most common customer pain points. And at the end, the analysis revealed critical usability issues that were affecting user adoption. The product team prioritized these issues, leading to a successful product update that increased customer satisfaction by 15%. Now, give us an example of how you would use data to influence business decisions. Thank you for that question. In my last job, our sales team were struggling to meet quarterly targets, and the leadership team was unsure of the root cause. What I had to do was to analyze the sales data to uncover trends and insights that would explain the decline in sales performance. And then I started by gathering data from the CRM system, looking at historical sales performance, customer demographics, and sales rep activities. I then identified a trend where sales were lower in certain regions and among specific customer segments. Then I analyzed customer feedback and found that the sales rep were not addressing common objections effectively. I presented this data to the leadership team along with recommendations to train the sales rep on handling these objections. And the result, based on my analysis, the leadership team implemented targeted training for the sales rep. This led to a 20% increase in sales in the affected regions over the next quarter. Okay, tell us about a time when you had to implement a new process. What challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? The situation in this particular scenario was that in my previous company, we were transitioning from a manual reporting system to an automated system. The process was initially slow, and the reporting team was resistant to change. What I had to do was to manage the transition and ensure that the new process was implemented smoothly. The action I took to bring this about was I started by meeting with the reporting team to understand their concerns and gather feedback on what worked and what didn't in the manual process. I also conducted a series of training sessions to familiarize the team with the new system and address any issues they faced. I created a step-by-step guide to help them transition smoothly. And the result, although initially met with resistance, the reporting team gradually adopted the new process. And as a result, the time spent on generating reports was reduced by 40%, and the accuracy of the reports improved, leading to more informed decision making across the company. Can you now describe a time when you helped to identify a process improvement opportunity? Thank you for that question. At my previous company, the customer support team was facing long response times due to inefficient ticketing and communication process. What I had to do was to identify the root cause of the delays and then propose a solution. The action I took was to conduct a thorough analysis of the ticketing system and observed that the issue stemmed from a lack of automation and inefficient workflows. I worked with the IT team to implement an automated ticket categorization system that would prioritize urgent issues. Additionally, I recommended integrating a knowledge base to allow customers to resolve common issues without contacting support. This process change reduced response time by 30% and improved customer satisfaction by 25%, as customers were able to find solutions more quickly. All right, now tell me about a time when you had to manage multiple priorities. How did you ensure everything was completed on time? In one of the projects I did in my past project work, I was managing multiple stakeholders across several departments, each with different deadlines and expectations for delivery. My task was to prioritize all the tasks effectively and ensure that all deadlines were met without compromising quality. In order to be able to do this, I used a combination of project management tools like Jira and a shared calendar to keep track of all deadlines. I also held regular status meetings to update stakeholders on progress and address any blockers. I also made sure to break down larger tasks into smaller, manageable chunks and focus on completing the high priorities tasks first. As a result, by maintaining clear communication and staying organized, I successfully met all project deadlines and the stakeholders were satisfied with the timely delivery of the project. That's really, really good. Now, why don't you describe a situation where you had to deal with an unhappy stakeholder? How did you resolve this issue? And what exactly did you do? At a previous job, one of the key stakeholders was upset because a project I was working on had been delayed due to unforeseen technical challenges. My task there was to address the stakeholder concern and find a way to get the project back on track while managing expectations. I scheduled a one-to-one meeting with the stakeholder to understand their concerns. I also explained the technical challenges in detail and provided a revised timeline. I also proposed some immediate action steps to ensure we would catch up on the delay. I made sure to keep them updated regularly with progress reports. One of the reasons why I had a one-to-one meeting with this particular stakeholder was because this stakeholder had a powerful influence on this project, and I had to have a one-to-one with them to gain their confidence and to alleviate their fears. As a result, this stakeholder appreciated the transparency and the plan for addressing the delay. The project was completed successfully within the new time frame, and the stakeholder was satisfied with the result. Okay, that's really good. Now, tell me about a time when you had to collaborate with a cross-functional team. How did you ensure effective communication? What exactly were the actions that you took, and what was the result? Um, in this situation, it was in one of my previous projects when I worked with the government. I was tasked with working alongside the development, marketing, and sales team to launch a new product. Now, these were different teams and different people. My task was to ensure that all teams were aligned and that the product requirements were clearly communicated across functions. What I had to do was to set up weekly cross-functional team meetings to ensure consistent communication and track progress. I ensured the meetings were cross-functional so that I could pull stakeholders from the different departments. I also created a shared document where each team could update their task and highlight any dependencies. Additionally, I used Slack for quick communication and to address any issues in real time. This approach ensured that all teams were on the same page and helped avoid miscommunications. The product was successfully launched on time and it exceeded sales expectation in the first quarter. Now, can you describe a time when you had to use your technical skills to solve a business problem? In my previous company, there was an issue with customer churn due to a slow and cumbersome online checkout process. The task that was given to me then was to analyze the issue and propose a technical solution to improve the customer experience and reduce churn. What I had to do was I worked with the development team to analyze the existing checkout flow and identify bottlenecks. I used my technical skills to map the process using flowcharting tools like Visio, and I worked closely with developers to propose optimizations, just such as reducing the number of steps and integrating a one-click payment option. In other words, I tried to create a lean process. As a result, after implementing these changes, the checkout process became much faster, reducing abandonment rates by 25% and customer churn by 15%. All right, tell us about a time when you had to manage a project with a tight deadline. How did you ensure timely delivery? I do realize you're a business analyst, but I would like to know if there had been occasion where you had to manage a project with a tight deadline. Thank you again for that question. In my previous role, I was asked to help deliver a system update within a 2-week deadline due to a regulatory change. My task was to manage the project efficiently to ensure compliance with the new regulations while meeting the tight deadline. And because of the tight deadline and the regulatory change, we did not have a chance to quickly have a project manager in this project, and that was why this task was assigned to me. The action I took was to immediately gather the necessary resources. I defined the scope and created a clear timeline with milestones. I also kept the team focused by ensuring that everyone understood their individual tasks and deadline. Regular check-ins helped identify potential issues early on, and I made adjustments to ensure the project stayed on track. As a result, the project was delivered on time, fully compliant with the regulations, and without any critical issues. The team was praised for their efficiency under pressure. Okay, can you now describe a time when you had to analyze customer feedback to drive a business change? What were your challenges? How did you resolve that? In my previous job, we noticed a decline in customer satisfaction scores. After a thorough review, we found that customers were unhappy with our mobile app's user experience. I was tasked with analyzing customer feedback and making recommendations for improvement to increase satisfaction and user engagement. One of the actions I took was I gathered feedback from customer surveys, social media, and support tickets. One of the reasons I did this was to truly understand the problem. And then I categorized the feedback to identify common themes. Most of the issues revolved around confusing navigation and slow loading times. I then worked with the UX team to redesign key screens and prioritize optimizing load speed. As a result, the redesign was implemented, and within a few months, customer satisfaction increased by 18%. Additionally, app usage grew by 30% after the improvements were made. Okay, now do you want to tell me about a time when you had to manage stakeholder expectations during a project? At my previous company, I was working on an IT infrastructure upgrade, and the stakeholders had high expectations regarding the speed of completion. My task was to ensure that the stakeholders understood the challenges and the realistic timeline while managing their expectations. I held a series of meetings with the stakeholders to explain the technical challenges and reasons for the extended timeline. I broke down the process into manageable phases and gave clear milestones. I also kept them informed with regular progress updates to ensure transparency. I did this because I realized and understood that maintaining constant communication was a very, very good way to manage stakeholders' expectations. As a result, by setting clear expectations and maintaining open communication, the stakeholders were more understanding of the delays. The project was delivered successfully within the revised timeline, and they were pleased with this outcome. All right. I hope you've learned a lot from these example questions. These are example questions, and you could tailor them based on your particular interview situation. But it's important to remember that when answering questions, try to use the STAR method, as we've explained in this session, where STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. You do not have to you do not have to specify and say this is the situation, this is the task, this is the action, this is the result. But in answering your question, you should make those demarcations, make it flow, and your interviewers would understand that yes, you are following the STAR method. And there's nothing wrong as well in sometimes actually saying this is the situation, this is the task I was assigned to do, this is the action I took or actions, and this was the result. Once you are able to tailor your answers in this way, you give your interviewers a very good understanding that you have a good understanding of what the question is, and you put yourself in a very good position to get that job. Thank you very much for listening, and watch out for our next session on more interview questions and how to answer them. Have a great day.